The mistreatment became violent. While she was carrying the baby, Darren actually shoved her in the belly. She went to the ER to make sure the baby was okay. The little one was fine. But that move showed Sarah and everyone else exactly what kind of monster he was. Sarah didn't pack her bags right then and there. We aren't judging her. It is a fact we have to grasp if we ever hope to stop these tragedies. Walking away from a toxic partner while pregnant, raising another kid, and dealing with someone who cut you off from the world. That isn't an easy choice to make. It is actually one of the riskiest moves a person can try to pull off. Staying is never something to blame the victim for. It happens because the abuser rigged the game that way. We also need to look at what didn't occur during that time. No authorities stepped in, and he faced no charges for attacking a pregnant woman. There was no system in place to make Darren answer for the harm he had already done. Predators who get away with it don't realize they're wrong. They realize they can get away with it. By about 2018, Sarah mustered the courage to call it quits. She got out, took back her place in Ilkeston, Derbyshire, and started the hard work of fixing her life as a single mom of two. However, one major loose end was left dangling. Darren Hall kept a key to her place. He never gave it back. She never swapped the locks. That key wasn't just a jagged bit of brass. Given their history, it was a message, a claim that the breakup wasn't real, at least not in Darren's head. It was a tool for constant entry, a tangible way to hold on to the dominance. Sarah had tried to escape. They stayed in touch a bit over the next few years, and mainly because they had a kid together. Sharing custody with a toxic ex is one of the hardest things you can go through. This gives a manipulator a perfectly valid reason to stay involved in their ex's life long after things are supposedly over. Fast forward to April of 2022, Sarah's grandfather passed away at 71, and that kind of heartbreak often brings a moment of clarity. While mourning that loss, Sarah made a firm choice to finally remove Darren from her world for good. She was setting a boundary. Most folks might hurt when a romance ends, but they eventually accept the reality and move on. But for a guy like Darren Hall, who defined his whole existence by controlling this one woman, that boundary meant something totally different. It felt like a direct threat, a slap in the face, and a challenge to his authority that he just couldn't stomach. Studies on domestic violence murder paint a clear and consistent picture that we cannot ignore. The weeks right after a woman decides to leave for good are actually the deadliest phase of any toxic relationship. Darren Hall wasn't someone who could handle losing his grip, and June 20th, 2023 fell on a Tuesday. Sarah had hung out with a buddy earlier that day, enjoying just a regular afternoon in Ilkeston. Surveillance cameras last caught sight of her around 9 in the evening near her place on Norman Street. That video would turn out to be the final glimpse of her alive. She got home that night, but before 10, Darren let himself in with the key he'd kept. Sarah clearly didn't want him around, and a witness later told police she explicitly asked him to get out. He wouldn't listen. He just sat down, stayed put, ate some food, and started a fight. The vibe in that home was thick with the sort of dangerous tension that survivors of domestic abuse know all too well. Sarah kept her composure enough to drive her friend back to her own place. She returned alone to find him waiting. She texted her bestie at 10 to 2, sent her final text at 10 to 9, and stopped replying at 10:37. Her best friend checked in then to ask if she was okay, but she never got a response back. Her closest friend spent that entire night and the next few days with a sinking feeling that something bad had happened. It starts as a small worry in your gut and slowly grows until you realize something terrible and permanent has taken place. Her instincts were spot on, but by the time anyone did anything about it, Darren Hall had already utilized those hours to his advantage. He had plenty of time to clean up the mess, dump the evidence, drive around, and come back acting like everything was normal. One of the neighbors nearby heard noises that night that would stick in her memory forever. A loud crash came from the bedroom area, followed immediately by total quiet. It wasn't a peaceful silence. She texted Sarah and got a reply claiming the dog just had a seizure. The text said all was well, which sounded believable enough to stop her from panicking right then. She had no idea that Sarah didn't send that text. Darren Hall was using her device to control the story and stall for time. Early in the morning on June 21st, the neighbor woke up, looked out, and spotted Darren by his van with the back doors wide open. He shut the doors, hopped in the driver's seat, and sped off into the night. She didn't realize it then, but she had just watched the final steps of Darren Hall's plan to erase Sarah. He wasn't frozen in shock over his actions. He was calculating, active, and treating this like a problem to be solved. Over the next few days, Hall went around telling everyone that Sarah had just taken off. He told the neighbor he had no clue where she went or why she left so early, but he couldn't explain why her car was still in the driveway. Later on, he claimed that a few of her personal items were gone, trying to sell the lie that she had packed up and left on her own. We often forget just how much our smartphones track our every move. Every network, login, location ping, and step counted creates a digital footprint, and that data would ultimately destroy Darren Hall's cover. At 1:50 in the morning on June 21st, Darren's device linked to Sarah's internet before syncing with his van's navigation system. Tracking info places him heading north on the Mona and getting off at exit 29. He pulled into a roadside stop on the A617 near Chesterfield, a desolate spot you'd only visit at 2 o'clock in the morning if you had a serious reason to be there. The digital evidence from that location was shocking. For about 9 minutes, the flashlight on Darren's phone was turned on and off multiple times. His fitness tracker logged 266 steps, which is way too much movement for that time of night. This was completely out of character compared to his usual habit of sleeping soundly from midnight until 6 in the morning. A figure operated within the shadows, executing tasks with precision that demanded physical exertion and illumination, but the lies spun on screen went even deeper than that. That soothing message fired off from Sarah's device to a worried neighbor about the dog having a fit was certainly not typed out in a frenzy. Darren needed to bypass her security, craft a text mimicking her speech patterns, and hit send with the specific goal of stalling any potential search. We are clearly not looking at a guy paralyzed by heartbreak here. That same cold, manipulative mindset that dominated Sarah during their time together had simply shifted focus towards saving his own skin. That specific fact holds weight far beyond just the legal ramifications involved. It provides a window into the true character of Darren Hall and who he had been all along. Right after taking the life of his child's mother, his gut reaction wasn't sorrow, regret, or even surprise. It was purely about maintaining dominance. Police finally received a welfare check request on June 23rd, a full 3 days since anyone had last spotted Sarah breathing. With her vehicle sitting untouched on Norman Street and her mobile device powered down, everybody close to her knew something was terribly wrong. Being the dedicated mom she was, Sarah never would have just disappeared and abandoned her girls like that. Law enforcement kicked down the door and discovered exactly what they feared they might find. The scene inside the apartment was incredibly disturbing, featuring a mop bucket and bleach that pointed toward a frantic yet focused cleanup job. Investigators collected a snap chain featuring Sarah's elephant pendant, which was part of the 23 total pieces of evidence tagged. They grabbed electronics, apparel, and a blue tarp, while her robe and house shoes were eventually recovered from a dumpster close by. These tiny personal artifacts whisper a silent, tragic narrative of their own. Authorities took Hall into custody for homicide on June 23rd after cellular pings led detectives to a roadside pull-off near the interstate exit. A specialized unit began combing through the thick brush right after the clock struck 12 on June 26th. The crew located Sarah Henshaw's remains, which were badly decomposed, alongside shreds of blue material that perfectly matched the tarp from her residence. It was that identical plastic sheet, that identical individual, and that identical brand of planned malice. Hall started out denying it all, wearing the cool demeanor of a guy who thought he covered his tracks well enough to walk free. However, once the proof started stacking up against him, his narrative started to shift. He spun a fresh version claiming Sarah took a tumble down the steps and that the whole thing was just a freak accident. He claimed fear took over, leading him to make awful choices like transporting her corpse to the middle of nowhere and trashing her property. He admitted to firing off texts to worried buddies from her device and scrubbing the crime scene down with heavy chemicals. Then he just went back to his daily routine while her relatives lived in terror. But we need to look at how flimsy that excuse really is. While fear is a genuine emotion, Hall's actions weren't erratic. They were methodical and followed a strict sequence. He drove to a chosen, secluded spot, packed a tarp beforehand, and utilized his phone's flashlight to operate in the pitch black. Every single move demanded a choice, and every choice meant shoving down fear to prioritize strategy instead. Collectively, These actions paint a picture of a systematic individual who knew precisely what he was executing, not a scared guy flailing around. The way he altered his testimony exposes a lot about Darren Hall's true nature. He started with a total refusal to admit guilt, which is the standard play for someone who thinks he successfully hid the evidence. Once the facts made that lie impossible to maintain, he pivoted to the accident story, showing us a man adjusting his tactics on the fly. Neither of those reactions looks anything like a person truly processing the death of a romantic partner. Both strategies look exactly like the moves of a player just trying to beat the game. Darren Hall's court proceedings kicked off on December 4th, 2023 at Derby Crown Court and ran for about 2 weeks. The state had a tough hill to climb since the medical examiners couldn't pinpoint exactly how she died due to the condition of her remains. No obvious physical wounds existed to lock down the murder charge with 100% certainty. However, reports mentioned bruising on her neck that matched the width of a robe belt, a specific point the lawyers presented to the jury to build their argument. Yet the verdict didn't rely solely on the autopsy results. It hinged on the entire scope of the situation. They had the digital footprint putting Hall at both the home and the dump site, plus a scientific link between the torn plastic sheets. A witness next door reported a heavy thud and saw him packing his truck, not to mention the text sent from her number after she was already gone. Then there were the janitorial supplies, the snap jewelry, and the long history of domestic violence that provided the context for it all. While you could maybe argue against each clue individually, the combination was undeniable, leading the jury to hand down a guilty conviction. Darren Hall, the carpet installer and former boyfriend, was now officially a convicted killer. The judge handed him a life sentence with a mandatory minimum of 17 years behind bars before he can even ask for parole. Right now, he is locked up at Nottingham Prison. For the family she left behind, the conviction brought a sense of justice. It feels empty and falls short in every way that counts, but it is still a legal reckoning. The local people stood up. Donors gave over £9,000 for her burial, and to help her 2 daughters, 2 children who must face life without a mom, yet deserve to know she is remembered and her killer is in jail. To fully grasp the Sarah Henshaw tragedy, we have to look past the surface details of the crime and dig into the psychological framework lying underneath. This killing was neither abrupt nor unforeseeable. It represented the boiling point of a 10-year cycle that experts in domestic terror would spot instantly as one of the deadliest patterns in partner violence. The way Darren Hall acted throughout their entire history matches perfectly with what doctors call coercive control. This is totally different from, heat of the moment fights where both sides get heated. Coercive control is defined by how lopsided it is. One person systematically rules over, watches, and suppresses the other. The driving force isn't rage, it is dominance. The aim isn't to win a debate, but to possess another human being. From the first red flags Lorraine saw in 2012 to the attack while she was pregnant in 2016 and keeping the house key after the breakup, the pattern never broke. Darren Hall felt he owned rights to Sarah Henshaw that she had no power to take away. Keeping that key after they split up carries a mental weight far heavier than just simple access to a building. In the mind of an abuser, a breakup often sparks what experts call an identity threat. The abuser builds a self-image on controlling the victim, so he falls apart when that victim walks away. That key served as a mental token. It was a tangible item that let Hall keep pretending inside his head that his entry into Sarah's life was still valid. It convinced him she hadn't really left, and that in some deep way, she still belonged to him. Sarah getting stronger, especially after her grandpa passed in 2022, lines up exactly with what studies call separation assault. Data proves time and again that the chance of murder spikes drastically when a victim takes steps to leave for good. The more clearly a woman shows that the relationship is done, the more the controller feels his grip slipping. Regarding Darren Hall, Sarah choosing to cut ties wasn't just a breakup, it was a threat to his existence. His answer to that threat was to kill her. His actions after the murder, like carefully dumping the body and sending fake texts, scrubbing the scene with bleach and staging a missing person case, are what criminal profilers call instrumental post-offense behavior. You are not looking at a guy overwhelmed by sorrow or regret. You are seeing a man whose main goal right after taking a life was saving his own skin. The abuser and the murderer were the same man. This tragedy brings up a hard question with no easy answer. If the red flags were waving for 10 years, and they definitely were, why wasn't Sarah kept safe? Prosecuting coercive control is incredibly tough. It rarely leaves a clear smoking gun. It forces victims to piece together a history of abuse they have been brainwashed to accept as normal. The story of Sarah Henshaw goes beyond the brutality of a single man. It is a wake-up call to do better for her girls, and for every woman currently trapped in a dynamic similar to the one that took her life. Before we wrap up, let us review the entire timeline one last time from the start. 2012, Sarah introduces Darren Hall to her mom, Lorraine. Controlling habits are spotted right away. 2016, Sarah carries their baby girl. Hall attacks her physically while she is expecting, shoving her stomach. She goes to the hospital. The abuse is now out in the open. Around 2018, Sarah and Hall break up. She starts fresh as a single mom to her 2 kids. Hall hangs on to a key to her house. The locks never get swapped out. April 2022, her grandpa passes away at 71. She doubles down on her choice to cut Hall off forever. June 20th, 2023. On Tuesday, Sarah hangs out with a pal and appears on security cameras around 9 p.m. near her place. Hall lets himself in with that stolen key. Sarah tells him to get out. He won't go. She drives her friend home and comes back by herself. The last text goes out at 10:09 p.m. A check-in text sent by her best friend at 10:37 p.m. goes unanswered during the overnight transition from June 20th to the 21st, 2023. The neighbor hears a heavy thud inside Sarah's house, followed by dead silence. So she texts to check in, but gets a response typed by Hall on Sarah's device, claiming the dog had a medical episode. Moving deep into the darkness at exactly 1:50 a.m., Hall's phone hits the home network and van GPS. While digital logs reveal, he clicked his flashlight on multiple times and took 266 steps at a turnout off the A617 near exit 29 of the Moan between June 21st and 23rd, 2023. Hall spins a story to her loved ones that she just walked out, then returns to her place to trash her robe and slippers, which are eventually recovered from a dumpster nearby on June 23rd, 2023. Authorities get a tip about the situation, break down the door, and uncover scrubbing supplies, a snapped elephant charm, a blue tarp, and 23 other seized objects. Officers slap the cuffs on Hall and book him for homicide. Shortly after 12 a.m. on June 26th, 2023, a body suspected to be Sarah's is found in the brush at a roadside stop along the A617, right near the Moan exit 29. Each year, countless women in the UK are let down by the very institutions meant to keep them safe. They are betrayed quietly within courthouses, precincts, and medical centers where the tough questions are avoided, and sometimes they are failed in the most final way imaginable. Their lives are taken by the one individual who vowed to cherish them. Sarah Henshaw was just 31 when her life was violently stolen. She was a mom to 2 girls, a loving daughter to her own mother, Lorraine, and a solid friend to those fortunate enough to know her. People close to her remember her as a social butterfly who loved having a good time and had a laugh that was contagious. She spent years attempting to get away from a controlling partner, and she finally found the strength inside to cut ties for good. Tragically, that determination might be exactly why her life ended. Here's the account of Sarah. This isn't just about how she died, although we'll cover that thoroughly because it needs to be heard. It is also about the red flags that waved for more than 10 years, the police work that came after, and the verdict that was finally handed down in her honor. If anything we discussed today hits too close to home for you or someone you know, please get help. We do not have to let this cycle continue. Are you prepared for the grimmest tales from across the pond? Check out our latest release, Unreal True Crime, British Edition. 35 stunning homicide files that will have you biting your nails. Pick it up now on Amazon as a paperback or Kindle, or download the PDF straight from our site. You can find the URLs right down in the video notes. Grab yours now so you don't miss a thing. All right, let's get back to the events at hand. Back in 2012, Sarah first brought Darren Hall home to meet her mom, Lorraine. She was already raising a little girl on her own and had that guarded hope that often appears when you want a fresh start. Lorraine wasn't sold on him quite so fast. Right out of the gate, she picked up on some issues. She saw how he interrupted her, how he made choices on her behalf, and his obsession with tracking her location and company constantly. That is the textbook definition of coercive control starting out. It usually isn't flashy or loud. It creeps in gradually, eroding the victim's will until they are so programmed to obey that the abuse becomes invisible to them. This type of manipulation is actually a felony now under the Serious Crime Act of 2015 in England and Wales. Acknowledging what experts and victims have known forever, that the scariest predators aren't always the ones throwing the hardest punches, but the ones who dominate every aspect of your life. Come 2016, Sarah was expecting Darren's baby, which would be their second girl. Any facade he put up in the beginning had completely crumbled by then.